I woke to pounding on the front door, loud, frantic, uneven blows that shook the house. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. The clock on the nightstand glowed at 2:03 a.m. The sound came again, harder, desperate. My heart raced as I threw off the blanket and hurried down the hallway. Every step echoed. The night was silent except for those knocks. I flicked on the porch light, and what I saw through the glass froze me in place. It was my daughter, Clara. She stood there barefoot in her nightgown, her face swollen, her lip bleeding. Her hair was tangled, her eyes glassy and terrified. Before I could even open the door fully, her knees buckled. She fell forward right into my arms. "Clara!" I screamed. Her body was limp, her skin was ice cold. I dragged her inside, trembling, trying to keep her head up. Blood smeared across my hands and the floor. My mind went blank for a second. Then instinct took over. I grabbed my phone and dialed emergency services. My voice cracked as I gave them my address. "My daughter. She's hurt. Please hurry." The dispatcher's calm tone didn't match the chaos inside me. "Stay on the line, ma'am. Is she breathing?" "Yes, but she's fading," I said, watching her chest rise and fall in weak, shallow breaths. "Help is on the way," the voice assured me. I pressed a towel to her mouth to stop the bleeding. Her face was bruised, her left eye swollen shut. Her wrist had a red mark, the shape of fingers. That was when it hit me. Someone had done this. Someone had hurt my child. The sirens came fast. The paramedics rushed in, lifting her carefully onto a stretcher. I followed in the ambulance, gripping her hand, whispering her name over and over. The ride was a blur of flashing lights and fear. At the hospital, they took her straight into the emergency room. I wasn't allowed in. I stood outside the door, my heart pounding like a drum, my mind trying to piece together how she ended up like this. Clara was married. She lived across town with her husband, Mark. I had seen her earlier that week. She looked tired, but she smiled and said she was fine. I believed her. Now I knew better. After what felt like hours, a doctor came out. His face was serious, but not hopeless. "She's stable," he said. "She has a concussion, some bruising, and a split lip. No internal bleeding. But she's lucky. One more hit to the head and she might not have woken up." I gripped the chair beside me to keep from falling. My hands still smelled of blood and panic. When they let me in, I saw her lying there, pale against the white sheets. She looked like a child again. I brushed the hair from her face and whispered, "You're safe now." But even as I said it, a cold truth sank in. Whoever did this was still out there. Hours later, while Clara slept, a nurse handed me her phone. "We found this in her pocket," she said softly. The screen was cracked, the battery almost dead. I opened it to check her emergency contacts. That was when I saw the message thread. Dozens of texts, one name repeated over and over. Mark. The last message read, "You think you can walk out? You'll regret this." My stomach turned, my hands trembled. I scrolled up. There were more. Angry words, accusations, and another name I didn't recognize. A woman's name appearing between their fights. That's when I realized this wasn't a random argument. It was about another woman. And whatever happened tonight wasn't an accident. I put the phone down, staring at the sleeping figure of my daughter. The bruises, the blood, the fear, they all had a name now. Mark. The man who promised to love her. The man who swore to protect her. I sat there until sunrise, listening to the soft hum of hospital machines, the beeping that confirmed she was still alive. My anger grew heavier with each breath she took. When she woke up, I would find out everything. And when I did, someone was going to answer for this. When I check her phone again later, I see a message thread that makes my blood run cold. "If this were your daughter, would you call the police first or confront the man who did this yourself?" Like and subscribe for more stories of truth, survival, and the strength that only love can teach. The hospital room was quiet except for the slow, steady rhythm of the monitor beside Clara's bed. The morning light slipped through the blinds, soft and cold. I hadn't slept. My mind was still replaying the knock at 2 a.m., the blood, her body collapsing in my arms. Her phone sat on the tray next to her, screen cracked but still glowing faintly. I picked it up again, telling myself I only wanted to check for updates from the hospital or family. But as soon as I unlocked it, the screen lit up with new messages. They were from Mark. "Stop acting like a victim." Another one came seconds later. "You brought this on yourself." My hand went cold around the phone. He knew she was in the hospital, and still, those were his words. Not worry. Not apology. just venom. Then another notification popped up, this time from a number saved under the name Tessa. The message read, "He's mine now. Stay out of the way." I stared at the words, my chest tightening. Tessa. The same name I saw in those earlier texts. The one that had been circling their arguments for months. I opened the full message thread. What I found there made my stomach turn. Photos, selfies, dinner reservations, receipts for hotel bookings, conversations laced with arrogance and secrecy. There were texts from Clara, too, long, desperate messages begging him to stop lying, to come home, to think of their future. Most of them had no reply. Then one stood out, her last message before she came to me. "I can't live like this anymore. If you hit me again, I'll tell someone." The timestamp was from that night. I felt sick. This wasn't one fight. It was months of emotional warfare, manipulation, betrayal, and physicals. Abuse escalating each time she tried to stand up for herself. I took a deep breath and began screenshotting everything. Every message, every date, every photo. This wasn't gossip or heartbreak anymore. It was evidence. The nurse came in briefly to check her vitals. She asked if I wanted breakfast, but I shook my head. "No, thank you." I could barely breathe, let alone eat. When the nurse left, I stared at Clara's face, swollen but peaceful in sleep. I thought about how many times she had told me she was fine, how many holidays she smiled through while hiding bruises under her sleeves. I remembered the times I had sensed something off but didn't want to pry. I thought she was simply tired. No, she was surviving. I closed the phone, my hands trembling, my heart burning with both guilt and rage. How did my daughter end up married to a man who thought love meant control? How did no one see this coming? Then, as if the universe wanted to test me further, the phone buzzed again. A new message from Mark. "Delete everything before I get there." He was coming. To the hospital. To her. I stood immediately. My pulse spiked. I didn't know if I was more afraid or angry. I went to the nurse's station and explained the situation, showing them the texts. The nurse's face hardened instantly. She said security would be notified. When I returned to the room, Clara stirred. Her hand moved weakly against the sheet. I sat beside her, brushing the hair from her forehead. Her lips parted slightly, dry and trembling. I leaned closer to hear her. Her voice was faint, barely a whisper. "Is he here?" Not, "Where am I?" Not, "What happened?" Not even Mom. Her first thought was fear, and in that moment I realized this wasn't only about getting justice. It was about protecting her from ever having to feel that fear again. I took her hand gently. "You're safe," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You're not alone anymore." Inside, I made a silent promise. I would not let that man near her again. When Clara finally opens her eyes, the first thing she says isn't about the pain. It's about fear. "Would you tell her the truth about what you saw, or protect her until she's stronger?" When Clara finally opened her eyes, it wasn't relief that filled the room. It was silence. Heavy, fragile silence. Her gaze darted around as if she were still trapped somewhere I couldn't see. I reached for her hand, my throat tight. "You're safe, sweetheart. You're in the hospital. You're with me now." Her lips trembled. She tried to speak, but only a cracked whisper came out. "He said no one would believe me." Her eyes filled with tears, spilling down the sides of her face. "He said I was nothing, Mom. Nothing." Those words hit like a knife. All the nights she called late and hung up quickly. All the times she said she was tired or just clumsy. I saw the truth now. The exhaustion wasn't from work or life. It was from him. I brushed a tear from her cheek. "You are not nothing, Clara. You are my daughter. You are everything." She shook her head weakly, her voice breaking. "He'll come. He always does. He said he'd find me wherever I go." I froze. Those words told me everything. This wasn't the first time she'd run. This was a cycle: escape, apology, return, and repeat. And each time, she lost a little more of herself. Her breathing quickened, panic rising. I pressed the call button for the nurse, asking for something to calm her down. When they stepped out to prepare it, I moved closer, holding her shoulders gently. "Clara, listen to me," I said quietly. "He's not coming here. I won't let him. You need to rest. Let me handle the rest." But deep down, I knew words weren't enough. That kind of fear doesn't fade with comfort. It fades only with action. As she drifted back into a medicated sleep, I stepped into the hallway, phone in hand. I called Daniel, an old friend of mine from university, now a lawyer. He picked up on the second ring. "Daniel," I said, trying to steady my voice, "I need your help. It's about Clara." I explained everything, the messages, the injuries, the threats. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a pause before he spoke. "You need to document everything," he said firmly. "Photos, messages, medical reports, everything. Don't delete or move a thing. And make sure she's never alone, not even for a minute." I asked about pressing charges, but his tone turned careful. "You can, and you should. But right now, your first priority is protection. File a restraining order as soon as possible. I'll send you what to do next." I thanked him and ended the call, staring at the dark screen. Protect her first. Everything else could wait. Back inside the room, I took photos of her injuries, her face, her wrists, the bruises on her neck. Each click of the camera felt like both a wound and a weapon. Then I sat by her bed again, watching her sleep. She looked so small, like the child who once ran to me after scraping her knee. Only now, the wounds were deeper, not on her skin, but in her spirit. I whispered to her softly, "You're not alone anymore, Clara. He won't touch you again, not while I'm breathing." The day passed slowly, but the night came fast. The hospital grew quiet, the hall lights dimmed, and I finally closed my eyes in the chair beside her bed. Then I heard it, the low rumble of an engine outside. At first I thought it was nothing, but when I looked through the small window near the bed, I saw a familiar car pulling into the parking lot. Mark's car. He didn't come alone. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat, a woman with bright red hair. Even from here, I knew who it was. Tessa. My heart began to pound. The nurse's warning echoed in my head. If he comes, alert security immediately. But this time, something inside me shifted. Rage burned through the fear. I stood by the window, watching as they both stepped out of the car, his posture arrogant, her face twisted with satisfaction. They were coming for her. Again. Not this time. That evening, Mark's car parks outside, and he doesn't come alone. Would you confront him face to face or call the police first? The night air was thick with tension. The hospital's fluorescent lights reflected off the hood of Mark's car as he parked crookedly in the driveway, headlights cutting across the lawn. I could hear his boots crunching the gravel before I even saw his face. Tessa trailed behind him, wearing a smug grin, arms folded like she was watching a show she'd already seen. The sight of them together, the man who broke my daughter and the woman who helped him do it, made my stomach twist. I opened the door slowly, but stepped out and locked it behind me. Clara was still asleep upstairs under medical supervision. She didn't need to see this. Not yet. Mark's eyes landed on me, cold, empty, the kind of eyes that knew how to lie without blinking. "Where's Clara?" he demanded. His voice was low, calculated, but I could hear the control slipping beneath it. "We need to talk." I folded my arms. "You're not seeing her, Mark. Not now. Not ever, if I have anything to say about it." He scoffed, taking a step forward. "It was a misunderstanding. Couples fight. She's overreacting." Behind him, Tessa let out a laugh. "You should have seen her face when we left. Pathetic." The sound of her voice sent a surge of anger through me. My hands shook, but I didn't move. "You think this is funny?" I said, my tone sharp. "She's in a hospital bed because of what you did." Mark tilted his head, smirking. "You don't know the whole story." "Oh, I know enough," I shot back. "I saw the bruises. I saw your messages. I saw her blood on my porch at 2 a.m. That wiped the smirk off his face. For a second, his mask slipped, and I saw the man he truly was, the one who liked control, who hated exposure. "You went through her phone?" he snapped. "I did," I said firmly, "and I've already sent copies to someone who'll know what to do with them." His jaw tightened. "She won't press charges. She never does. You know that." I stepped closer until only a few feet separated us. "You're right. She won't have to. I already did." That was when he finally lost it. His face turned red, his voice rising. "You think you can take her away from me? You think you can destroy my life because of one stupid argument?" I didn't flinch. "You destroyed your own life the moment you laid a hand on her?" Tessa rolled her eyes, but her expression faltered when she noticed something, the flashing blue and red lights reflecting off the house. 2 police cruisers pulled into the driveway. I had already called them when I saw his car. Mark froze, glancing over his shoulder. The officers stepped out, hands on their belts. "Sir," one of them said, approaching, "we've had reports of domestic assault and harassment. Please step away from the property." Mark raised his hands, trying to play calm. "This is ridiculous. I'm her husband. I just came to talk." Before anyone could speak, Tessa blurted out, "He didn't mean to hit her that hard. It was an accident." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. The officers exchanged a look. Mark's face drained of color. "Ma'am," one officer said to Tessa, "did you just admit he hit his wife?" Tessa stammered, realizing what she'd done. No, I didn't mean—" But it was too late. One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Mark lunged forward, pointing at me. "You did this." "No," I said quietly. "You did this to yourself." As they cuffed him, Tessa stood frozen, her smirk gone. The weight of her words was sinking in. I turned and went back to the door, my hands still trembling, but my heart steady for the first time in days. Through the glass, I saw Clara's photo on the mantel, smiling, alive, whole. I whispered to it, "It's over," or at least, it's starting to be. But deep down, I knew it wasn't truly over yet. Men like Mark don't go quietly, and women like Tessa, they don't stay silent for long. When the officers arrive, Tessa blurts out something that changes the entire case. "Would you film everything for proof, or stay silent and let the police handle it?" The flashing lights outside my window had barely faded when the night finally fell silent. I thought it was over. But as the officers began their questioning, everything shifted in a single careless moment. Tessa stood by the patrol car, arms crossed, trying to look calm. Her confidence was slipping, though. Her mascara had smudged under the streetlight. The officer speaking to her kept his voice even. "You said something earlier," he reminded her. "You said it wasn't supposed to go that far?" "What did you mean by that?" Tessa froze. Her eyes darted toward Mark, who was sitting on the curb in handcuffs. I meant the argument," she stammered. "They were fighting, and he lost his temper. It wasn't supposed to go that far." The officer's body camera blinked red, recording every word. My breath caught in my throat. Lost his temper. Not supposed to go that far. That was a confession, plain as day. She didn't realize what she'd done. She had turned an accident into an admission. Mark's face changed instantly. His smirk vanished, replaced by something cold and hollow. He turned toward her and hissed, "Shut your mouth, Tessa." But the officer heard it too. "Sir, that's enough. You'll have your chance to speak at the station." Within minutes, both of them were escorted to the cruiser. Mark tried to argue, twisting the story. "She's lying. She's crazy. You don't understand." But his voice cracked, and he even sounded like he didn't believe himself anymore. When the car door shut, I finally let my knees give out. I sank to the steps of the porch, my heart pounding. The cold night air felt heavier now, but it carried something else, justice beginning to move, even if slowly. Inside, the house was still. The clock ticked softly. I walked back to Claire's room and sat beside her bed. Her face was bruised, her breathing steady. The doctor said she needed rest, not stress. I stroked her hair gently and whispered, "You'll never go back to that house. I'll make sure of it." My phone buzzed with notifications, neighbors messaging, asking if everything was all right. I ignored them. I wasn't ready to talk. The image of Tessa's pale face and Mark's fear replayed in my mind. Hours later, when dawn broke, I finally slept in the chair beside my daughter, still holding her hand. 2 days passed in uneasy quiet. The police called once to confirm the report was filed. I gave them everything, the messages, the screenshots, the timestamps, every shred of proof. They promised to follow up soon. Then, that afternoon, the phone rang again. The voice on the other end was sharp, confident, and cold. "This is David Lang," he said. "Mr. Mark Dawson's attorney. I suggest you stop spreading false accusations and delete whatever recordings or messages you claim to have. My client is prepared to file a defamation suit." I stood there in silence, the phone pressed against my ear, listening to his threats. He didn't sound like a lawyer defending a client. He sounded like a man protecting a lie. "Your client nearly killed my daughter," I said quietly. "And I have proof. File whatever you like." There was a pause, then a low, measured laugh. "You don't want this to get ugly, Mrs. Harris. Think about your reputation. Think about your daughter's future. We can make this disappear. Quietly." He hung up before I could answer. I stood there, trembling, not from fear, but fury. I realized what this was now. It wasn't just about Mark's violence, it was about power, about silencing the truth. That call forced a choice I never thought I'd face. Stay silent and let them bury what happened, or fight back with everything I had, even if it meant dragging the whole story into the light. And I already knew my answer. 2 days later, Mark's lawyer calls with a threat that forces me to make a choice. Would you fight back legally or expose everything publicly? The call from Mark's lawyer replayed in my head all night. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, and soaked in arrogance. He thought I would fold under pressure. He thought a few legal threats would scare me into silence. He didn't know me at all. By morning, I had already gathered everything: the police report, the hospital records, the voice recordings, the photos of Clara's bruises, and the message thread that showed exactly who he was. I opened my laptop and began sending them, one file at a time. The first went to the lead officer on the case, the second to the detective in charge of domestic violence reports, the third to the email address of a local journalist known for exposing corruption and abuse. Her name was Rachel Porter. I attached a simple note: if they try to silence us, make sure this is heard. Within minutes, she replied, I believe you. I'll verify everything. Don't back down. Those words gave me strength I didn't know I still had. Later that day, I called the lawyer's office myself. When he answered, I spoke calmly, every word deliberate. Mr. Lang, I've sent everything to the authorities and to the press. If you want to continue this conversation, I suggest you do it through official channels. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp exhale. You've made a mistake, Mrs. Harris. No, I said. Your client did. I hung up before he could speak again. That evening, as the sun set, I sat beside Clara's bed. She was still weak but healing. Her color had returned, though her eyes carried the weight of everything she'd endured. I didn't tell her about the call, not yet. She needed peace, not more fear. I stepped outside and looked at the quiet street. The same street where Mark had once stood, yelling threats, was now calm. I could finally breathe. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from Rachel. Check the evening news at 7. My pulse quickened. I turned on the television. The headline flashed across the screen. Local businessman under investigation for domestic violence. Police confirm new evidence. There he was. Mark's photo. The same face that once smiled at my table, pretending to be the perfect husband. Now, the world saw what he truly was. The report detailed everything: the hospital records, the witness statement, and the audio from the night of his arrest. Even Tessa's partial confession was mentioned. The anchor's voice was steady, clinical, but every word cut through me like fire. Upstairs, I heard movement. Clara's door creaked open. She stood at the top of the stairs, pale, trembling slightly. Her eyes met the screen. Mom, that's him, she whispered. I reached for the remote, hesitating. Should I turn it off? Protect her from the storm that was about to come? But then I saw something shift in her expression. Not pain, but strength. She stepped closer and said quietly, No, leave it on. Her voice was steady now. The same girl who collapsed on my porch was gone. This was a woman reclaiming her voice. As the report ended, she sank into the couch beside me. Her hand found mine. He can't hurt me anymore, she said. I nodded, but I knew the battle wasn't over. Men like Mark didn't go down quietly. He would fight, lie, twist, and manipulate. But now, his mask was gone, and we were no longer alone. The next morning, Mark's face appears on the evening news, and Clara wakes to see it. Would you protect her from seeing it, or let her know justice is beginning? By morning, the story was everywhere. News alerts, group chats, whispers in town, everyone had seen it. Mark's perfect image was collapsing piece by piece. His company issued a statement saying they were aware of the allegations and cooperating with authorities. People from his office commented under the article, some defending him, most expressing shock. I read each one slowly, letting the truth spread like sunlight after a long night. Tessa deleted every social media account she had within hours. Her smiling photos with Mark disappeared into digital dust, but screenshots never die. The internet had already saved her words, the mocking comments, the pictures, the messages that said, "He's mine now." They became proof of everything she tried to deny. The police reopened the case under domestic violence and coercive control charges. That phrase, coercive control, stuck with me. It wasn't about one night. It was about months of manipulation, silence, and fear. Finally, someone was naming what my daughter had endured. The phone rang several times that day. Unknown numbers. I ignored them. Then it rang again, and I recognized the voice when I picked up. Mark. He wasn't shouting this time. His voice was broken, trembling. "Please," he said. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. You have to believe me." I listened without saying a word. He kept talking, switching between apologies and excuses, blaming the stress, blaming the affair, even blaming Clara for not understanding him. When he finally paused, I said one sentence. "You almost killed her." Then I ended the call. That night, I sat beside Clara. She was scrolling through the same news story on her phone. The headline read, "Prominent contractor under investigation after domestic assault allegations." She stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered, "I'm free." Those two words were quiet but powerful. It wasn't joy. It was relief, the kind that comes after years of being told to stay silent. I held her close, feeling the weight leave her body as she exhaled slowly. Her hands still trembled, but her voice was steady now. "He can't touch me anymore." For the first time in months, I believed her. The next morning, the doorbell rang. The mailman handed me a plain brown envelope. No return address, but the handwriting stopped me cold. It was Mark's. I stood at the door, holding it in both hands. Clara was still asleep upstairs. The edges of the envelope were slightly torn, like he'd sealed it in anger. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Part of me wanted to rip it open, to see what lies or pleas he'd written inside. The other part of me wanted to throw it straight into the fire, let the ashes carry his words away. I walked to the table, laid the envelope down, and stared at it for a long time. The house was silent again, except for the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Some doors, once closed, should never be opened again. Then a letter arrives in the mail, from Mark himself. Would you read the letter, or throw it away unopened? The envelope sat on the kitchen table for 2 days before I finally opened it. The weight of it felt heavier than paper, heavier than words. Clara didn't ask about it, but I knew she'd seen it too. Sometimes silence says more than questions ever could. When I tore it open, the smell of cologne hit first, the same one he used to wear when he came by for family dinners, back when everything still looked normal from the outside. I unfolded the letter and began to read. "Dear Mrs. Turner," it began. Already too formal, already too hollow. He wrote pages filled with excuses. He was stressed. He was pushed too far. He didn't mean it. He loved her too much to let her go. I read every word, waiting for accountability that never came. Then I reached one line that made my stomach turn. I only did it because I thought she'd never leave. I stopped reading. The sentence burned more than any of his apologies ever could. That wasn't love. That was control. That was possession pretending to be passion. I walked to the fireplace, still holding the letter. Clara had come downstairs and stood behind me. I didn't turn to look at her. I didn't need to. I tore the pages in half, slow, deliberate, then dropped them into the fire. The flames caught quickly, curling the paper, devouring the ink until nothing was left but ash. Clara watched quietly. For a moment I thought she might cry again, but she didn't. She took a deep breath and said, "Let's move on." Her voice didn't tremble this time. It was calm, certain, final. That night I realized something. Closure doesn't always come from apologies or forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from refusing to carry the weight any longer. We went to bed early. For the first time in months, Clara slept through the night without waking up from nightmares. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight flicker across the burned remains in the fireplace. A week later, the court date arrived. The media would be there. His lawyers, hers, everyone waiting to see how far this story would go. That morning, Clara came downstairs in a simple gray dress. No makeup, no jewelry, just quiet confidence. She looked at me and said, "Well, Mom, I'm ready." I nodded, trying to smile. Then she added something I didn't expect. "I want to face him alone." My heart sank. I wanted to protect her, to stand beside her, to make sure she didn't have to relive it again. But I saw in her eyes the strength I'd been praying for. She wasn't the same woman who collapsed at my door that night. A week later, the court date arrives, and Clara does something that surprises everyone. The courthouse smelled of cold air and old paper. Every sound echoed, footsteps, whispers, the shuffle of files. Clara sat beside me, her hands steady in her lap. No shaking, no hesitation. I kept waiting for her to break, but she didn't. She looked stronger than I'd ever seen her. When they called her name, she stood, smoothed her dress, and walked to the stand. The room went quiet. Even Mark stopped fidgeting. For a moment, it felt like time had frozen, every eye on her, every breath waiting for her first word. She took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was clear, not loud, but steady. She told the court about the control, the fear, the nights she hid bruises under long sleeves and smiled through pain. She told them how he'd convinced her she was worthless, that no one would believe her. Each sentence landed like a stone, heavy, undeniable. When she described the night she collapsed at my door, I gripped the edge of my seat. The prosecutor stayed silent, letting her speak uninterrupted. Even the judge's expression softened. The courtroom had heard many stories, but this one cut deep. Then came the final question. "Do you forgive him?" the lawyer asked gently. Clara paused. The silence stretched. She looked at Mark, the man who had once vowed to love her, and said, "Forgiveness isn't freedom. Accountability is." The air shifted. For a moment, no one moved. Then, quietly, people began to clap. It wasn't loud or chaotic, just respectful. Even the judge didn't stop them. Mark sat frozen. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't respond. When the verdict came, it was swift. Bail denied. Charges upgraded. The mistress, Tessa, didn't even stay to hear it. By the next morning, she'd left town. Outside, reporters gathered by the steps. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. Clara didn't answer a single one. She walked past them, calm and composed, the same quiet strength she'd carried since the day she burned that letter. In the car, she turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "Mom, I don't need to hate him anymore. I just need to live." Tears filled my eyes, not because of the pain, but because she'd finally chosen herself. After the verdict, Clara says something that brings me to tears. "Would you forgive if it meant peace, or hold the line for justice?" The morning after the verdict, sunlight filters through the curtains for the first time in months without the weight of fear pressing on my chest. Clara sits across from me at the kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a cup of tea she hasn't yet sipped. The faint bruises on her face have turned to soft shades of healing. But her eyes, those once hollow eyes, now hold something new. Stillness, resolve. She looks up and says, "You saved me, Mom. You didn't just open the door that night. You gave me my life back." The words stop me, not because of their weight, but because of what they reveal. For so long, I had believed I failed her. I thought I hadn't seen the signs soon enough, hadn't asked enough questions, hadn't protected her when she needed it most. But now, as she speaks, I understand something I hadn't before. Saving someone doesn't always mean pulling them out of the fire. Sometimes it means standing beside them while they walk through it, making sure they know they're not alone. I reach across the table and take her hand. "You saved yourself," I tell her. "You chose to live." She smiles, and in that moment I see my daughter again. Not the frightened woman who had collapsed at my door at 2 a.m., but the strong, steady girl who used to laugh until her stomach hurt. The girl who had dreams, who believed in love and kindness. She's different now, older in ways that only pain can shape. But she's here, alive, free. Weeks pass before the dust truly settles. The court proceedings end, the news cycle moves on, and the silence in our home slowly becomes peaceful instead of haunting. But healing doesn't come easy. Nights are still long. Sometimes I hear her cry quietly behind her door. Other nights, I find myself reliving the sound of her fists pounding at mine, begging to be let in, broken and terrified. We begin therapy together. At first, she resists. She says she's tired of talking about him, tired of remembering. But healing isn't about forgetting. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that pain tried to erase. Our therapist tells us something I never forget. Abuse doesn't end when the bruises fade. It ends when the silence breaks. That line becomes a seed in both our hearts. A few weeks later, Clara tells me she wants to volunteer at the women's shelter downtown. She says she wants to talk to others, to tell them they're not weak for staying too long or afraid for leaving too late. I tell her I'll go with her. The shelter is small but alive. The first time we walk in, the air feels heavy with stories. Some whispered, some screamed, all carrying the same ache. Women sit in quiet corners, clutching children, holding paperwork, waiting for someone to believe them. And I do. I believe every single one. I start helping where I can, folding donated clothes, making tea, organizing files. Clara, meanwhile, listens. She sits with the women, hears their stories, and in each one, I see her strength returning. Every Me Too she hears becomes another brick in the wall she's building between her past and her future. One afternoon, as we drive home from the shelter, she says softly, "I used to think silence was safer, that if I didn't talk about it, it would hurt less. But it only made me smaller." I glance at her and nod. That's how they keep control? By making you believe your voice doesn't matter. She looks out the window, the city lights reflecting off her face. "Not anymore," she says. Months pass, seasons change. The house feels alive again. She laughs more now, hesitant at first, then fully, like a sound rediscovered. We cook together, take walks, talk about small things. Her scars are still there, but they no longer define her. They've become proof of endurance. I find myself changing too. For years I lived quietly, believing that strength meant keeping things together, never showing cracks. But I've learned that silence is its own kind of prison. Watching Clara rebuild her life taught me that speaking up doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. One evening I find her sitting on the porch, reading a letter from one of the women at the shelter. The woman had written to thank her for sharing her story, saying it gave her the courage to leave her own abusive marriage. Clara folds the letter, presses it to her chest, and whispers, "That's what I want to do, Mom. I want to keep helping." I sit beside her and place a hand on her shoulder. "Then, that's exactly what you should do." The night air is cool. The same porch where she once collapsed in pain now feels like a place of peace. It's where her old life ended and her new one began. I look at her profile, strong, calm, unbroken, and realize that no act of violence could ever destroy what she's become. Later that week, we attend a community event for survivors. Clara's asked to speak. She hesitates at first, but when she steps up to the microphone, her voice is steady. She says, "I used to think I was weak because I stayed. But I wasn't weak, I was scared. Fear is powerful, but truth is stronger. My mother once told me that love should protect, not hurt. And she was right." The room is silent. Then someone begins to clap. Others follow. Tears fill my eyes, but this time they aren't from pain, they're from pride. When we leave the event, she takes my hand and says, "You know, that night when I came home, I thought my life was over, but it was the beginning of something new." I nod. "You were reborn that night, Clara, and so was I." We've both changed. The woman I was, the one who doubted, who feared, who believed silence was safety, is gone. In her place stands someone who knows the value of truth, of voice, of standing firm even when the world tells you to sit down. Clara still carries her scars, but they no longer define her story. They're simply chapters she's moved beyond. Now, every time I see her smile, I'm reminded that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. Healing is a slow, quiet revolution. It starts with one decision: to speak, to act, to refuse to stay silent. Sometimes I visit the shelter alone. I sit with women who remind me of Clara, who whisper through trembling lips, "I don't know if I'll make it." And I tell them what I learned the hard way. You will. You're stronger than you think. And one day, you'll be the one helping someone else find their way back. Love should protect, not abandon. Family isn't always blood. It's whoever shows up when the world turns away. Mrs. Lewis showed up for me. I showed up for Clara. And now, Clara shows up for others. That's how cycles break, not with anger or revenge, but with courage and truth. As I write these words tonight, I look around our quiet home. The laughter from the living room, the soft hum of the television, the gentle sound of Clara's voice speaking to someone on the phone from the shelter. It's peace. Real, earned peace. My daughter came home broken at 2 a.m., but we built something stronger. The courage to never be silent again. If you believe no one deserves to suffer in silence, like and subscribe for more stories of strength, truth, and survival.